Tag! Ready?
Person, that's very important. Yes, God has brought us alive to become human. Get our human beingness back, our person back, which is part of revelation, and that self-revelation is that we respect ourselves. Respect for ourselves. Definitely. Well, you gotta explain it to me. We have some respect for myself, ourselves, but less respect for other black people.
Check out!
Yeah.
And it makes sense to advertise. I know a couple of people who and the predatory practices that they had specifically the campaigns against black people. They're quite aware that security will have played off it. They know that the self-worth is not there, and I can trick you to believe you can buy it. And they have these high-end products for you to buy it. It's a massive trap because the society teaches you to know, hate yourself. And the advertising is giving you the remedy for self-hate, which is not beneficial to you.
Hot, hot!
And then you have the black nationalists. That's Brennan advertising. He calls me the incense girl. He says he has a group of black nationalists, that burn incense all the time and wear the red, black, and green. And so they target us, with certain products, and then you have your average black and yeah, I have a friend who's so she spends a lot of time watching TV, so I go visit her and I watch TV with her. She loves all of these shows, The Housewives of Atlanta and Being Married to Medicine. And I'm watching these things. I know a lot of people. I don't know anybody who acts like that. I don't. And then I'm looking at
Let's go now!
the clothes and the hair and the jewelry, and these people are just so over the top. But you're watching this, you identify in the one scene, it was the Housewives of Huntsville or something. They had little children and their little girls who were just like the mothers, the same.
Here we go, here we go!
And so we're perpetuating, this very material
Go!
persona onto people. Like this is what makes you. And the good thing about it is, number one, I think it's well, we can have money.
It's I call it white new black culture.
Yeah.
It's like with a white producer, it's kind of crap. It's black culture.
But you're educated. That's what I understand. They ask me, I'm like, these people, they have medical degrees, PhDs, MDs, and they're acting like this.
There seems to be a growing generational gap where they're already, where many young people feel disconnected from their elders. I'm not sure if you see me paraphrasing. Many of them are crying out to be heard, visible, seeking acceptance from those who do not value. How can we begin to address this disconnect? What role does historical awareness play in bridging this gap between generations?
That's $1 million question. And sadly enough, I would say it's about every black organization is facing it. NAACP down to the neighborhood block association. How do you bridge that gap with young people? And so I really don't know. It's going to take. I think if we collaborate Because I see some community projects like the art project where people from different ages in a particular community will come together and work with young people and talk to people. That seems to get, but that's really at the micro level. And in the larger realm, that's a lot. You try to educate them. So,
Ready?
shameless plug for my map. My
Ready, ready?
project, digital management project, which you take a large amount of information and put it together using technology. So, what I did to take all this information, not only of slavery faults, but the second map looks at anti-colonial and civil rights movements. And I'm putting it together on a map, like a Google map, and have people
Come on, set.
so that they'll learn about each
Get up.
instance. And my target audience is 15 to 25 young people because they don't know the history of existence. They don't, I don't think, because I can say, even when I was a teenager and I would hear about the civil rights movement, I get tired of hearing about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. I mean, like, how many times are you going to tell me this story? And I became bored. And I really didn't see the essence of the movement until I got much older and started really looking at their strategies, their tactics, how they networked, how they sacrificed, their courage, what they were up against. And I'm like, oh, okay. And by the time we get to 2050, Martin, 2050, the majority of the population, the black population, are going to be around 25 years old. And at the trajectory we're going now,
Here we go, set.
this fascism and imperialism, they need to know resistance.
Ready?
And so that's why I put that up there, so you can learn about the rule of culture and how do you mobilize people for living. So I get each facet of that, how the leaders talk to people, and how do you actually convince people to get involved? And I was laughing because now, of course, we're boycotting Target and other places, and I was saying, black people.
Let's go.
Some of them are still going to the store and forget things a lot. So, but during the 60s,
Check out.
it was simple. We had horses who would actually go stand in front of the store. And they would be too much. Even women would beat other women. We're not going in there, to maintain it. So you hear all these stories and see all these.
That's the stuff they don't tell.
We can become empowered.
Sometimes it took people standing in front of them and whooping other black people's ass and said, "No, you can't shop here." Right. But they don't like talking about that because so you have to sometimes. Remember what I say? You got to make people do their job. That's a common thing. That's not unusual. That's not strange. That's a normal thing. But that's why we don't. That's why they say we don't fight back, because we do, but they don't like teaching that fighting back actually accomplishes things. They like to act like it doesn't do anything, but like they've said before, nobody has ever gotten freedom without taking it. No one, no one, no one, and no one. You got to take your freedom. They ain't gonna hand it over to you. That's why it was a civil war. People was dying,
The white man knows everything.
On the set.
White man is close to God. And then here you are acting the opposite of that.
Go.
And so these arguments even in my own household. Obviously, because I attended Lincoln University with Brother Rick Cheney. He said, y'all used to be such good children. So y'all went to that. But why? Say it like that. And I think that we couldn't understand. I can understand my parents now. But how do you have respect for somebody like that?
Patience. Patience with the difference in those. You think about that?
I think they're too critical. You know, we're critical of their music, the way they dress, the way they act, we make assumptions. And I do the same thing. I had a student come to class, typical stepping out of the housewives of Atlanta, dressed like that, attitude. And so I automatically assumed this young woman is not about too much. She was one of the brilliant students I had. You know? And I just signed for her just by looking at her. Then once I really listened to her and got to know her and what she was saying, and what young people are going through. One young girl working at Camden High, she had a whole funeral. She was only 16. And like well over, seemed like well over 20 to me, because the wall of her friends who had been killed. You know, so there's a lot of trauma, a lot of drama, a lot of pressure to be, and unfortunately, in this society, because I do this critique of capitalism that won't wait, and then you got that whole thing about capitalism, goal and alienation from yourself, and you don't know who you are. The further you move from yourself, then you can
No!
you know, just an exposure. I love it. You don't even have to say, it's your love. And you know what?
Ready?
They can't love what whatsoever. So I think these are the questions we have to start asking our young people. That can kind of bring them to a healing. And I think that too would together.
Let's go now.
I try to really listen to young people, just
Check
listen
go.
and watch, and just really be empathetic. I don't know how you can navigate in the world and live with the people if you don't have any concept of who you are. And unfortunately, most of the
Here we go. Here we go. Hot, hot.
stereotypes of black people are still out there. The criminalization of the race, and black women are beautiful. No one wants a black woman, not even black women, you know. The stereotype of us being argumentative and negative. So, I can't answer that.
Have you observed this? Like, some black people replicate what they think black
Ready,
people should
ready.
be. It's like they take the worst qualities, like they watch the show, and they're not like that. They're really not like that.
Yeah,
But they think the expectation is wrong. So it's kind of tricky when some people behave a certain way. It's like we're putting on that. But unfortunately, they're replicating the behavior against the high school. They feel pressure to act in a certain way because they feel like this is what it is to be black.
we really see that on a global level. It seems like, well, number one, racism is global. There's no way you can go where you don't deal with racism. So therefore,
Come on,
when you
come on,
black
set.
people, you have this level of inferiority. That's different based on where you are. But it
Go.
really seems to me that black people throughout the diaspora, throughout Africa, the African diaspora, They take the very worst of Black Americans and amplify that. And I guess what you're saying is that they think that that's a form of being accepted by others. And
Here we go, shot!
But that's what we do. And even, you've always had,
Ready?
you've always had people like you. You've always had a group of Black people. This woman. Always had Black people who were free. Also had some Black people who were educated. But the problem was miseducation. Because what they would do is assimilate and inculcate the ways of whites in order to be accepted. But in doing that, what it does is it pushes them away from the people. Because they think that's what families people think that they're better than them. So you have these two classes. Years ago, I was in London, and I went to a party that was thrown by some people from Ghana. And so when we got there, it was early in the evening. Everybody was prim and proper. There was a lot of what they call barristers, and doctors, and whatnot. Everybody, around 11 o'clock, the foo-foo came out. The music, the whole atmosphere changed. Everybody started to go back and being that their natural self. So it's navigating those two identities. And I really can't remember what the question was because I kind of went over the edge, but I was just thinking just about different stereotypes and how they play out throughout the world. Oh, yeah, it's important. Well, but how do you do that? How do you do that? And you're being raised by people who don't know who they are. Who were raised by people who didn't know who they were. So you have no one to teach you. And all you need really is one person in your life with some direction, with some good sense. But if you don't have that, you have that connection, you learn as you go along. So you learn from your peers, what you see on TV.
So how you got both your people?
Oh, yeah.
What is up with the cultural similarities?
Because we're all the same people. And this is something, there's this group, tying us back to reparations, there's this group in America called ADOS, African Descendants of Slaves. They're pushing for reparations. But they're pushing it only for Black Americans who can prove that they were enslaved in America. They're missing out on a whole nother dynamic. What they don't understand is that during slavery, Black people were transported from place to place. Right? Barbados being the first real slave society, then up into Jamaica, South Carolina. Right? So you have these connections of this movement, and even after slavery, you have Black people being shuffled around and moved through different areas. Now, a large majority of African people came through Ghana. Right? But actually, another plug, Joseph Harrison, on the African diaspora, you can Google it, he showed all the places in Africa that Black people were taken from. But Ghana being a major point, right, those people were taken to and Coromante were taken to Jamaica, Barbados, South Carolina, they moved to. So of course, yeah, you go to Ghana, you go to Jamaica, you're actually dealing with the same people. The same people. And I went on a trip, I went to Bermuda once, and we had a guy there from the Congo. And once we got to Bermuda, the locals came out and they did a traditional dance. And he was like, it's the same dance that we do. He was dance trace the language, especially of the Gullah, and the similarities with different groups in Africa. We're all the same people. But I think where ADOS and a lot of other black people go off a little bit is we don't understand, and you're talking about sense of self. We don't understand the sense of self that Africans
Set.
and people of Caribbean have because they didn't grow up and fell in the place. You know, when you're in an area and the majority of people around you look like you have a different attitude. You're living in a place where of
Yep,
hostility
that's where I felt
on a
it at
daily
college. Yeah,
basis. You don't ask for it. You go into a store, people are following you. You got this hustle, and you don't have it.
right.
I remember when I stayed in Tanzania 6 months on a Fulbright. When I got back to New York and I landed at Kennedy
Go.
Airport and I saw the white people, the rage,
Go.
the stress, and the rage, it came back like, it's over. You don't understand that until they really leave. And I think 2 or 3 days in the island when you stay at all inclusive, you don't really get the feel of it. You understand?
Mm-mm. No, you don't. We got the feel because we went in town. You don't get it, and you get a little bit more because it's all African still, but you know, you're being pampered like white people. And there is white people there. You know, that ain't the same. I felt different when I was in the city walking around. Because you remember, hell, me and old boy went out there when I was trying to get the money right. So I'm out there, like I said, it was different. It was different. Other people came up and talked to me. Remember I told you a guy came up talking about weed there on the streets, but it was, like I said, it was different. It was different. And I felt different because it was like everybody, like I said, everybody was black. We all African. What difference it made? Right. All you. Right. Because when I was in town, we see no white people.
Learn to typecast yourself because you don't. It's not even a thought for you to do that because you haven't seen it. What would an educational curriculum that you empowers our youth look like?
So that was one of the successes of the Black Power movement in the 70s was instituting Africana
Here we go. Here we go.
colleges, offering those classes, and then also infusing the curriculum in public schools. I know, for example, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia,
Ready.
Detroit, Chicago, a lot of those places. Curriculum were designed to give black children a sense of self, beginning with it's another story, but that we're still fighting today, right? To take children back to Egypt and tell them that this is where the civilization began, and these people were actually African people who did that, and then bring them up and like what black scholars are accused of just trying to make people feel good. Yeah, we are. We're trying to make people feel good. When we go into the kings and queens of Africa, the whole pre-colonial African history, and then go into the enslavement, not only from by the Europeans, but also by the Arabs. We're talking about the Arabs and their infusion, and the devastation. We look at the slave trade, we call it, but we don't really look at the devastation that took place in Africa. The population between 1500 and 1800 was
Ready.
more than half.
Come on. Set.
Being taken out. Not only people being taken out, but out and out genocide, the slaughters. thousands of athletes who just kill it. So going through that, and then coming to teach Black history all the time, and the students ask, well, isn't there a happy period? Well, happy would be the Harlem Renaissance. That's about as happy as we can get. And even then, during the Harlem Renaissance, you still had a reign of terror going on.
Here we go, shot!
On the one hand,
Check go!
but you have all this art coming out of the Black community. So, you know, to really show Black people and your folklore that we can do all under. Can you imagine where we'd be and what our lives would be like if we weren't pressing?
Yeah, because it's back to the sleep description. I don't think people understand society.
Let's go!
It's like a big aspect. So this is like years and years of progress not being made in secondary school.
Hot, hot!
It's the trauma of that.
The best account, of course, would be Walter Lyons. How you underdeveloped Africa.
On the jump!
And also Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery. And you know about that. That's not funny. Of course, he became the Prime Minister of Trinidad. And during the Black Power movement, he had to ban his own yeah.
Why was you forced to put that in the book?
He had to. Because it was slavery. You know, he had that consciousness when he wrote the book, but, you know, as a governor, you were like, you're trying to repress this Black Power thing. He banned his own book.
It's not on slavery, right? So this is not idea, right? You're really not supposed to complain about the history. It's supposed to be right? But when you analyze even the slave shit, how dramatic that is, and like being disoriented, not only are you a being of your life, but like the kind peace, death, exposed like foreign food, like it's just such like a mind-blowing experience that people don't know how it's going.
Well, it's changing a little bit now, because now we're talking about trauma. And of course, Joy, her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. She was a little ahead of her time, because we're just starting to get that way and looking at the impact of trauma generations on people. And, well, and this is one of my inspirations for doing the slavery book map, because as a Black person, we are shrouded in shame. You're in a predominantly white classroom, and you get to the topic of slavery, and all the white students look at you like you're still a slave.
Set! Ready, ready?
It's still, and I want to say, we strategize with that changes in all of this.
So, when everyone talks about epigenetics, right, they just seem to focus on like inherit. But when I think about, when I started to understand epigenetics, right, and say, yes, I may have inherited that. But what about all these other things that I inherited? The resilience, the brilliance, the courage.
And that's what I put in the narrative for the map. That the same
Got it. Ready?
that ran through our ancestors is in us.
Get up!
We can do this. We are willing to stand up. They did under extraordinary.
I never heard about the sister songs.
People like Solitude, also Marie Angelique in Montreal. People like her too. 50 years, maybe on 18th. She overheard her master say he was going to sell her. because her attitude. So she set Montreal on fire. Tried to burn down the whole city. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they captured her and tortured her, but she did a lot of damage. So yeah.
I really appreciate the conversation and sharing the information with me. And let the people know about your project too.
Yes, I would like to steer everyone to my website, Black Slave Revolts with an
Okay,
S.
ready?
Word, blackslaverevolts.org.
Down.
Okay, and you can also
Set
go to
go.
drwilliams.com. That's blackslaverevolts.org, and you will see these two maps now. This I just finished, hot off the press. It's only 2 weeks old. Yeah, it's 90% done, but it's live. You'll see two maps, one on the slave revolts. And then my new one is anti-colonial, like I mentioned, civil rights movements from 1944 to 1994.
Let's go
And
now.
what I realized after I started is you can't talk about 1944 unless you go back to 1934
Hut, hut.
and all the labor movements. And yes, so I start with the labor movements, the Communist Party, especially with the Scottsboro Boys and Marcus Garvey, and all of that people. How many chapters do you think Marcus Garvey had? He had over 1,240 different countries. And he still has active chapters. One in Costa Rica, and I know one in Namibia. I know that others, but there are active chapters of his movement. And of course, the two largest transnational movements would be the anti-apartheid movement and the Black Power movement. And you had Black Panthers in Israel, in India, in Australia, in East Timor. So I have all
Here we
that.
go. Here we go.
And it's color-coded red, black, and green after Honorable Marcus Garvey. And each marker not only gives you information, but it gives you, I'm into visuals. So I have images, I have video, and then at the end of each one, I have citations, scholarly citations. I don't want anybody to think, oh, this is just a Google map.
Ready?
Something. I want to maintain the integrity of the academic work and scholarship behind it.
Go.
The slavery map, I would say maybe 8 years, because I was working on other things. In between, I did my book of police brutality, the Philadelphia story. I put that little plug in. And, and I just kept putting it down. And right before the pandemic, all my ancestors told me, girl, you need to finish this thing.
Come on, set.
Finish this right now. And I just focused right on it. So when I start focusing, I was in less than a year. And I got that together. And then I put it online on the African Heritage Studies Association website right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I got over 236,000 views. So, and I don't know how people found that. And of course, the Smithsonian found this, and they wanted the ships. They just wanted the ships for the international.
Here we go, shot.
Which Trump president's going to close. I don't think he knows anything about it, but it's phenomenal in that they not only talk about slavery, they do object comparing. They're comparing what happened in slavery and what's going on now. So I knew that was, So they had slave shackles and handcuffs. And so they took the ships, and that's presently on display at we call it the Black Museum at the Triangle. That's going to be there in June.
Let's go.
We look at the criminal justice system. We talk about
that for Jamaica.
And not being people in terms of black education, housing, health.
Ready?
In Barbados, is my favorite place. I guess you know. My second favorite place.
Ready?
They grew up eating sugar canes. They had no food. And the one guy told me that, his lunch was a bag of sugar, right? And Barbados today has the highest rate of amputees from diabetes. So it's directly related to high blood pressure, to hypertension. I came across an interesting fact that black people in America have higher blood pressure than people living in a refugee camp. Can you imagine that?
It's the food or the stress?
It's the stress. It's the stress. I mean, we're under constant, and it's just on a subtle level. You mentioned the colorism. Yeah, we split it.
Okay.
What do you say to people that say black people have been a lot of barbarians?
Well, we had.
Yeah. Sound like shoes came.
Okay.
Oh, that's your phone, John?
A lot of times. And if we look at where we should be in terms of rock, we have not really progressed that much. But then again, if you look at it from where we were captured
Set, go!
and oppressed to where we are now, then it's like, and it's amazing. If you look at the period of history right after slavery, so between like 1868 and 1920, you're talking about people coming from almost 99% illiteracy, right? With rags on and on the plantation, and you look at them in the 1920s, the hats and the genius and the writing and the art. And that period of time. Yeah. It's amazing how we gotta look. I try to look at things globally. And
Set, ready? Hot, hot!
there was a lot of shocking things. One thing that was, of course, the punishments and all, but with the second act of the civil rights movement, and I asked people this now, so what's the longest boycott during the civil rights movement? And everybody say the same thing. Montgomery bus boycott, 382 days, right? I found a boycott led by high school students in Orlando, Florida, that lasted 3 years. Yes, every day after school they would go to the lunch counter and they'd sit down. As soon as they get there, the waitress would take the sign down, closed. And they would just sit there. And then they get up to go home and she put the sign back. 3 years. They were even arrested and held for $250 bail. Can you imagine? And at that time, and the community raised money, got them out of jail. And they were held for 3 years, from 1963, for them to integrate that lunch counter. I thought that was so amazing. And of course, I also like the enforcers. I like the idea of them beating people up. The never going. But it's just, I was looking at
Okay, break!
yesterday, and I was thinking,
But the book of African
Set,
history
hut!
is a book of 1,000 pages. The story of enslavement begins on page 996. It's only 2 pages long. Welcome to the John Henry Clark Ancestry Project. Dr. Clark reminded us that we should never begin our story with slavery. Dr. Clark said that if you begin your history with slavery, everything since then looks like progress. So the purpose of the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project is to expand and enhance understanding of African history and American history. At a time when people are, and this is the time when we turn back the clock,
Fuck.
Dr. John E. Clark was a young man who was born and raised in the rural South. And when he was 10 years old, he read an article written by Arthur Schomburg. That article was entitled "The Negro Bigs Up His Pants." Reading that article, a young Dr. Clark realized for the first time in his life that he came from a people who have a history that's older than time itself. That article prompted Dr. Clark to want to know more about his past.
Let's go now.
He left the South, made his way to Harlem, where he made the acquaintance of Arthur Schomburg. And Schomburg,
Ready.
a young 18-year-old John Henry Clark, how to study Europeanism, how to study humanism, and how to study world history, and synthesize all of these historical perspectives so that he could understand who he was in the world and how to better negotiate this world.
Ready up!
Clark's love for African history and African people, that I dedicate this Clark and Ancestry project to his. There's a total of 16 displays that comprise the John Henry Clark and Ancestry project. One specific piece that I'm quite proud of documents milestones in African history, and it gives us a timeline of human. That timeline begins 300,000 years ago, when Africans were the only human beings on the planet. As we move along the timeline, we see periods when Africans begin to walk out of Africa and populate Asia 65,000 years. Another group of Africans walked out of East Africa and populated Western Asia, the landmass now known as Europe. We've got instances on the timeline that marks the development of consciousness and scientific achievements.
Here we go!
7500 BCE, creation of the first calendar, 365 and 40 days, 4,230 BCE, the beginning of culture and civilization
Check go!
in Timothy, now known as Egypt. One of the main art pieces for the John Henry Clark and Ancestry Project is a 25-foot-long mural called the African's Eyes Mural. It documents 8,000 years of African excellence and success from the Nile to the Niger to the Potomac. If the picture is worth 1,000 words,
On the set!
this picture tells you very clearly who these women, who we are,
Hot!
exactly the same thing for years now. It's a book of African history with a book of 1,000 pages. The story of our enslavement begins on page 996 and it's only 2 pages long. The purpose of the John Henry Clark and Ancestry Project is to tell the story of the first 995 pages of African people on this planet. We have the exhibit here on the second floor of the third Society, 1816 12th Street Northwest. It's free and open to the public. We encourage you to come and to free your mind, again with a free mind, to get historically grounded. You're still missing your obligation to build a world your children's children will inherit.
Greetings and welcome to the movement with Kevin Shockley and Tofu Denai. Thank you for joining us. This show highlights the most important voices of current Black justice. This is a chance for us to learn from the most insightful and impactful leaders in the community. Today we're here with Mr. Anthony T. Browder, who is an author, book publisher, cultural historian, an artist, and an educational consultant. Mr. Browder has lectured extensively around the world, a graduate of Howard University. He has been described as a critically important leader of the community, and he is celebrated for his groundbreaking work surrounding ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt.
Ready!
Mr. Browder, welcome to the movement, and thank you for having us in your home.
Ready!
Pleasure to
Go!
be with you.
All right. Mr. Browder, the first question is not so much about your work as a legacy. You are one of the most well-known African-American cultural historians of our time. And within black communities,
They go on to state that approximately 40,000 years ago, another group of these same Africans walked into Western Asia.
Come on, set!
It's a $15 million exhibit. Somewhat understandable because not only was African ancestry, but everybody on the planet. So a person who has that consciousness, I would direct them to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. There's an exhibit there in the David Cope.
this show is about
Do the work, do the research, and to share this information with those with the greatest need to know. And this is all.
Here we go, set!
If I were doing less than that, I would be dissatisfied. But
Ready?
considering the fact that I'm this show is simply that the man of our ancestors to make us believe that we're less than what we truly are. It's a miracle that it's really not. It's a greater miracle that some of us have our minds intact and are striving to the way we go.
Let's go!
For certain in life. But that's what God
Set up! Ready! Ready!
Once we understand the source of that and tap into that power, then we become everything that our oppressors will say. And that is the issue.
you say to someone who's wondering why so much focus on African
Set up!
because I hear that all the time.
And that's somewhat understandable because not only are people that
Check go!
So a person who has that consciousness, I would direct them to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. There's an exhibit there in the David Cope Hall of Human Origins. It was a $15 million exhibit that was established about 7 or 8 years ago. And in that exhibit, it says that 100,000 years ago, Africans were the only people on the planet. It's at the Smithsonian.
I hear that all the time.
And that's somewhat understandable because not only have people of African ancestry been miseducated, but everybody on the planet has been miseducated. So a person who has that consciousness, I would direct them to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. There's an exhibit there in the David Cope Hall of Human Origins. It's a $15 million exhibit that was established about 6 years ago. In that exhibit, it says that 100,000 years ago, Africans were the only people. It's at the Smithsonian. David Cope Hall of Human Origins. Yes, that David Cope, that the Cope brothers. Right? So even a broken clock is right twice a day. Right? So David Cope says in that exhibit that 100,000 years ago, Africans were the only people.
It says it reinforces the fact that humanity was born in Africa. The first civilization of Satan lived in Africa, and Africa alone before they appeared anywhere else on the planet. It speaks to the reality that there is no such thing as race. Race is a false construct that was created by racists in order to confuse mankind. There's only one race, the human race, which has its origin in Africa. So everyone, on a genetic level, everyone is
Ready,
an
ready.
ancestor, whether they know it or not, or whether they look like it or not. The further you
Ready.
from further the sun, the light is getting the sunset mellow. And other factors contribute to the change in facial features. So that's one very important reality. You'll also find in the same museum, on the opposite end of the David Paul's Human Origins, you'll find an exhibit on ancient Africa. And in this exhibit on ancient Africa, as soon as you walk into the exhibit, it talks about the Nile Valley. It talks about ancient Kush. And what it states is that ancient Kush, the civilization of ancient Kush, rose around the same time as the civilization of ancient Kemet, but it lasted longer. It lasted about 3,000 years longer. So when we talk about Africa, we're talking about the birthplace of humanity. When we talk about Africa, specifically the Nile Valley civilization includes civilization in Uganda, Ethiopia, Kush, Sudan, and Kemet, or Egypt. So it's a 4,200-mile cultural migrant. And the culture migrated with the people from the south into the north. And so the civilization that referred to as Kemet or Egypt is considered by Chancellor Williams as Ethiopia's oldest ruin. Right? But we find in Kemet the greatest evidence of what human beings have achieved in their left of their own devices. The beginning of the beginning of government, the beginning of agriculture, the beginning of engineering, science, philosophy, astronomy, the beginning of all of those things that indicates a civilized nation and a civilized people. So Africa is important because it's the birthplace of humanity, culture, and civilization that expanded from the Nile Valley south and west, influencing dozens of countries on the continent. That is the reason why Europeans
Let's go now.
were coming to Africa, because Africa was the source of knowledge, culture, and civilization. And if we only go there, there's something to do.
If I'm watching this, and my question to you is, are you saying that me as a black person, as an African American, are you saying that my ancestors were ancient Egyptians? Is that what you're saying?
Well, part of what I'm saying is everyone's ancestors come from Africa. And what we've been able to ascertain over the past 4 years now, based on the research that we're doing in Egypt, excavations that we've been doing for the past 12 years in Egypt, we have come across evidence that shows a migration of Africans from the Nile to the Niger. We know that there were at least
Here we go.
that led to the development of culture and civilization within Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and the last group of Africans to migrate from the Nile to the Niger were those Africans who developed culture and civilization in Mali. They're known as the Dogon. It was those Africans in West Africa who were ultimately kidnapped and then brought to the Americas. So the Africans in the America, in the diaspora, are the descendants of West Africans who were kidnapped, who were the descendants of Africans in East Africa who migrated to West Africa over a period of 10,000 years. And in those cultures, in Ghanaian culture, Senegalese culture, in Dogon culture, they speak about their ancestors having migrated there from the Nile. So our job is to open the door for the more research to be done on this important aspect of human migration history for the generations who come behind us.
Ready.
So in this time, past several decades, others have been sort of uncovering this kind of artistic balance with the famous books and now the civilization. Since that's happened in time, there's been some backlash. There's been some people who have written some things to sort of challenge it. I wonder if that's what you take a look at.
Athens, 2004,
Come on, set!
it's a compact place. Only about 250,000 people live here. There are fine baths, theatres, temples, shopping arcades, and gymnasiums. It's warm more than half the year. This is also home to the world's first true and greatest philosopher, Plato.
So the world's first philosophy Plato. Well, it depends on which world you're talking about. The European world, the Greek world, they can think that if they want to. But in the world of reality, the Greeks learned philosophy. And it's the oldest philosophical text.
Got it. Ready?
Written in Kemet before Greece became a nation state. And anyone who has studied the history of the Greeks would know that.
Ready?
Those were so the Greeks were enamored with the history, culture, traditions of the Nile Valley. So philosophy was about cultivating a deeper understanding of your soul and your soul's relationship to the life that you're living. So everything within the history of Kemet reinforced philosophical concepts and ideas that were never acknowledged as being African American, but have served as
Here we go, set!
for philosophical traditions as well as religious.
Set, go!
Again, anybody who's dive into the study of Kemet as opposed to the study of Egypt, will begin to find that is the source for the knowledge and wisdom that has been attributed to these components.
And you mentioned earlier that we are in a process of remembering. You're a memory recovery expert. Can you help us understand what that means and how your expertise can help Black people?
Well, when you think about the fact that
Okay, ready?
our past has been erased, and then erasure has been forgotten. You go back to the comments that were made
Hot, hot.
around 1834. This politician said to other white Virginia politicians who also happened to be enslaved, he said, "Sir, we have so far as possible closed every avenue through which light may enter the slave's mind.
Let's go!
If we could extinguish their capacity to see the light, then they would be at the level of the beasts of the field. Our work would be complete." He said, and what is important is this intentional process of miseducation, erasing the historical and cultural memory of African people, and then seeing to it that that job was complete, so that they would say this was their life work, to erase our memory, to erase our culture. To even convince some of us that the Lord and Savior of the world is Jesus Christ condemned us to death because they didn't have a soul. So they could steal us, they could break us, they could sell us, they could lynch us, and not violate any of the so-called 10 Commandments because we were not human. So it means that they were in fact the ones whose memories had been erased because they didn't know that they were they didn't know that they were using the mothers and fathers of culture and civilization. So we've been dealing with a period for
On the ready!
of the erasure of the erasure of the erasure.
Ready!
It would bring back the sense of God of this philosophy is to begin to speak the truth that is within, a truth that will transform the world, a truth that will ignite something within the consciousness of everyone who upon hearing it will know that they were more than what they were. They're more than what they've been told. And that by taking time to center yourself, to study your history and your culture, to cultivate relationships with others who are doing the same, that then makes it possible for the best people to begin to manifest themselves in your living in this world.
And it makes me think about youngsters who are growing up in society and being socialized to not understand who they are. One of the things that they learn early are stories about other cultural groups. What's one story that all
Well, the most important story is humanity began in Africa.
Ready.
All so it benefits everyone to want to get as close to the source of that knowledge as possible because it benefits everyone. Race is a false construct. It was created by racists in order to sow seeds of confusion and division. That benefits a small handful of people while the majority suffers. So I believe that we're going through a profound period of change right now. The
Set.
earth is changing.
Ready, ready.
Politics is changing. The economic, social, and educational order of American society is changing, and it will never be as it was before. Now, change is inevitable. The question then is, what are you going to do in this process of change? Are you going to be behind the change and never catch up? Are you going to be caught in the middle of the change and try to find which way to go? Or will you be ahead of the curve because you understood that that was hard meant when you said
Set.
the clock people used to tell the political appropriate time of day. History is a
Hey,
topic
hey,
people use
get up.
History follows cycles. Once you understand the cyclical nature of history, then it's simply a matter of understanding where you are in the cycle, how you got here, and to be able to forecast what that cycle is going to look like over the course of the next year, 5 years, 10 years, or century, and position yourself accordingly. So that's the process that when people begin to
Ready, set.
understand how truly easy life is, right? Life gives you
Ready.
what you request of it. Life gives you what you give. And once you understand that everything, the structures are yours, based upon this ancient Kemetic philosophical principle known as reciprocity, this order of the millennium, for every single millennium the human beings have lived on this planet. And once you know these simple,
Down.
fundamental truths, then everything else becomes a walk in the park.
What are the first steps if somebody watching this wants to learn about Mod, wants to better understand what you share? What
Check
are some
out.
of the things you
Not because of some fault of our own, but because of the intentional efforts of our oppressors to deny us basic human rights. If you read Harvard English's masterpiece in this education of the Negro, we're in the position that we're in because of events that were set in motion over 100 years ago and have been repeatedly playing themselves out
Let's go now.
generation after generation after generation. It was
Hot, hot.
illegal for enslaved Africans in America to live. Why? Because the enslavers knew that if you could write and where you came from, what your profession was, what your cultural tradition was, then you could pass that information on to your descendants, and they would have a means of freeing their minds while their bodies were still enslaved. But if you ban reading, you ban writing, if you convince
Okay,
people
break.
that we are inferior, then that puts a
Here we go. Here we go.
it puts chains on your mind. So we're talking about undoing years of psychological slavery. Ms. A.C. Davis said psychological slavery or mental slavery is worse than physical slavery because such a person who is mentally enslaved can't see the shackles that are on their mind. So one of the best things that a person of African descent can
Ready,
do
ready.
is fall in love with books. Begin to read for all of your
Hut.
ancestors. So read the books by Oscar. Read my books. Read what I refer to as forbidden knowledge. There is a reason why my books were banned from Howard University. There's a reason why some people in the District of Columbia wanted to ban my books, Dr. Clark's books, A.C. Hilliard's books, Francis Cress Welson's books, because books are the passports
Come on.
to
Come on.
freedom,
Set.
to the freedom of the mind. So anyone who is truly interested in
Go.
wanting to become more engaged and sync through time has to begin by spending more time reading and less time on social media. They have to begin to cultivate a relationship with their inner selves and their ancestors. Or as a brother said at a lecture one time, they have to get off of Facebook and get their patient again. What is the problem with social media?
What is the
Ready
reason
up.
you said that about not giving social media as much what kinds
Here
of
we go,
impact do
shot.
you see us having as a result of social media?
I could reference my dear friend, who's now an ancestor, Dr. Patricia Newton, a psychiatrist who practiced in Baltimore. She talked about the fact that children, particularly children, young people, who spend time on social media, it rewires their brain. And that social media, and this data has been um, acknowledged by other social scientists, children specifically who are in the process of wiring their neurons, right? Developing the infrastructure by which they will live the rest of their lives. When you spend time on social media, that limits the
Let's go.
capacity for your mind to grow and expand as it had done for thousands of years. And that there have been studies done to show that people's tendency, particularly young people's tendency, to pick up the phone every time it dings, to check the email, check the messages, it creates a sensation in the body that is similar to the sensation that a crack addict has. And there are psychologists who are now saying that these devices are addictive. And studies have come out to show that the creation of these devices, the look of the screens, the music, and all of these things were developed by experts at Google and Facebook in order to make you addicted to this device. And the devices are used to sell you.
Ready.
So we are programmed to be consumers like no other generation. And as a result, and we are social creatures by nature, right? But this device, holding this device in our hands, has separated us from positive interactions with other human beings. So if you talk to young people today, just watch young people. They're walking down the street looking at their cellular devices. They don't engage in meaningful conversations with them. Or when they talk to an adult, they can't look you in the eye for more than 2 or 3 seconds. So what will be the long-term implications of generations growing up addicted to these digital devices and being strangers to human interaction? How would that affect our mental development, our emotional development? Not just issues that psychologists are beginning to look at seriously now. And I would trust that parents will begin to monitor and restrict their children's use of these cellular devices.
So the omission of truth about Black history, social
On the
studies,
set.
texts in schools is a big problem, and is one of the reasons why Americans and others have lost a lot of faith in society. Two-part question. One, is there a significant enough movement to correct the problem of a lack of truthful Black history in texts? So is there enough of them? And what current projects do you have going that are going to be important for you?
Well, personally, I feel that there is not enough momentum to infuse African content into curriculum K through 12 at a minimum. And one of the reasons why this momentum is not as strong as it needs to be is because adults in the community aren't aware of what the children are being taught. These adults don't even know this. These adults who are taxing whose taxes are paying for the miseducation of every child in every classroom have a responsibility to know the rules in which they're being taught and to insist that the next child education has really but we also know that education or miseducation is a $1 billion industry. In fact, writing and publishing a textbook is a $1 billion industry. And a handful of states, primarily Texas and California, determine the growth of textbooks that are used in those schools. So until we begin to look at the economics of miseducation and begin to hold school systems and school officials accountable, we're going to continue to get the same miseducation experience. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Makes perfect sense. And
what kinds of things do you have going on? Well, we've got a couple of projects going on. We are in our 12th year of the excavation and restoration of three Cushite tombs, three 2,700-year-old tombs. We're excavating and restoring in Egypt right now at this time. And as a result of the 12 years that I've spent in this project, this project has been going on, we have enough data to literally write the history of the Cushite presence in Kemet and the history of Kemet. And so that information is going to be coming out and it will be made available to school systems all around the country and around the world. We have a project, the Cultural Heritage Program, which is in place in about a dozen cities throughout the United States. We're working specifically with high school students where they're reading essays, selected essays from the underground, which will introduce them to specific aspects of and African culture. The part of our job at this point is to prepare a place for beginners and generation to expose and to what I refer to as the baby mind, information which has intentionally been withheld from students in classrooms throughout the United States and around the world. We have another very special project that should be available to the public in late 2021, and that is the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project. That program is going on the second floor of the That program is an outgrowth of my dissatisfaction with an aspect of the National Museum of African American History program. 60% of that incredible museum is underground. Is in the David M. Rubenstein History Hall. 60% of the artifacts in that museum, 60% of the history of African people in America is underground. Of the process of enslavement. And so when I first went to the museum and stepped into the space, I noticed that from an architectural standpoint, the space was dark, the exhibits were crammed together, the passageways were small, and they were forced to people all together. Because psychologically, they would feel as though they were in a slave ship. And then as they read the text in the exhibition and saw the horrors of the horrors of enslavement, I saw grown men and women. I saw two elderly black men walking through the exhibit, and I heard one say to the other,
Let's go now.
you know, I gotta get out of here. Well, I heard some black men. And what that really meant is that these elders had never been exposed to
Ready?
this knowledge is still not being taught today. So you have to wrap the knowledge of the process of enslavement. You're having visceral reaction to this horrific experience. And so we have to move beyond emotional response.
On the double.
Process set in motion the
Get up.
United States of America. This is the museum which is made in the United States of America. The darkest nation in human history. Columbus, America is built on the destruction of the indigenous people of this country and the enslavement of tens of millions of African people who were responsible for building this country and giving it a leg up on the rest of the world. So, you know, America doesn't want to acknowledge its greatest sin, and until she does that, she will suffer the consequences because karma is a mother, right? And you have to account for all the good and all the bad that you do in your life and in your existence. And so when I began to look at, when I became aware of how few of our people were aware of the horrors of enslavement and that there was no information in this incredible museum, there was no information that talked about who we were before our world was turned upside down. So my response to that was to not complain, but to gather the resources so that I could create an exhibition that would explain who we were. So this is the John Henry Clark Enhanced History Project. So we're enhancing the history that we're currently being taught using the model of John Henry Clark, Asa Hilliard, Francis Welsing, and so many of our scholars whose books were banned, right, in most school systems. This material consists of what I refer to as forbidden knowledge. Here in 2020, there is certain information that is not allowed to be taught in certain school systems right now because of people's fear of how people of African ancestry specifically will respond to learning the horrors of what was done to us. My suggestion is let's go back thousands of years before the Maya, thousands of years before our world was turned upside down, when we were in control of our destiny, when Africa was the showcase to the world. People from all around the planet strove in every way possible to come to the Nile River Valley to study the greatest examples of human achievement in the history of the world.
That's fascinating. So, sometimes when I am reading your books and listening to you now and talking about the importance of our history and culture, I know the connection. I think I know the connection between that and what's happening in the streets to Black people now. Could you just help people understand why this is important information in the face of the things that are happening to Black people now? How does it help us to address police brutality? How does that knowledge help us to address miseducation? How does it help us to address our issues with one another? How does that knowledge help us to improve those situations?
So, I want to quote one infamous person and one famous person. The infamous person is James Madison, fourth president of the United States, writer of the U.S. Constitution. The third building of the Library of Congress is named in honor of James Madison. And as you enter that building, to the right, to the left of the entrance is a quote by James Madison. Madison says that knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and the people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives. So knowledge is power, and whoever has knowledge, more specifically, of the world and the society in which they live, will be able to move through that society with ease and achieve the highest levels of success within that society. Now, the famous person I want to quote is one of my favorite scholars, John Henry Clark, who said that all history is a current event. We see the same things repeating themselves over and over and over again. Why are they repeating themselves? Because people have not learned the lesson. And you keep repeating the lesson